Creepy last words people said right before dying. A 20-year-old gang member was dying of primary liver cancer. In his last days, hours, and moments, he was angry. The family called the hospice nurse into the room and told her that they thought he was going. He wasn't responding, his eyes were glossy, his skin was cold, the end was imminent. His lovely mother whispered to him to go towards the light, to her Jesus. He opened his eyes, looked at her, and said, "F your Jesus." A second or two later, he slowly turned his head to the left and got the most horrific look on his face, as if he was looking at something that they couldn't see. And horrified, his face contorted, and he screamed with his last breath, eyes wide, "Oh sh! Oh sh! Oh no!" Then he made a guttural noise and promptly fell back into the bed and died. Every family member was shaking and too frightened to speak. The hospice nurse left the room and took 2 days off. She said she doesn't care if she never finds out what he saw.
Creepy things you never knew. Bears in Russia sometimes become so hungry in the summer that they become desperate for food and go to cemeteries to feast on the recently buried corpses. In 1977, we received a radio signal from space. It lasted around 42 seconds. Till this day, we don't know where that signal came from. If you're ever unsure with meeting up with someone and you want to stay safe, use publicdatacheck.com. It allows you to do background checks on anyone, and even has an unknown phone number lookup for those phone numbers that call you that aren't in your contacts. This has saved a lot of people from weird and strange situations. So check out publicdatacheck.com. If your immune system found out you had eyes, it would attack them until you would go blind. In 2002, actor Anthony Starr received a 12-month prison sentence because he had a bar fight in Spain. Witnesses say he drunkenly punched and smashed a bottle on a chef's head, saying to him, "You committed the mistake of your life. I'm going to look for you. I want to you." He managed to avoid jail time by paying the victim $4,000. Now, if you made it to the end of this video, let me tell you a secret. Typing "scream" all lowercase with the bars around it like this will give you a secret emoji down below. Let's see who can actually do it.
Did you know that people have seen mermaids in Indiana? Well, not the cute Disney mermaids that we're thinking about. No, these mermaids are referred to as mud mermaids. These sightings have been going on since the late 1800s. People in Indiana along the Ohio River have reported to see them on the banks of the river for years. And what they've reported sounds almost a little bit disturbing. These aren't your fairy tale mermaids. People say that they have green skin, hands like humans, but with long talons and webbed fingers, and razor-sharp teeth. They also say that they walk on the banks like dogs because instead of legs, like normal mermaid myths, they have tails. And they have absolutely no hair at all. Now, whatever these weird things may be, people say they're not known to attack. When they're sighted, usually they're eating other fish or frogs. But still, razor-sharp claws and teeth, that doesn't sound very inviting to me. So maybe these are freshwater mermaids, or maybe there's something else entirely. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna stay away from the banks of the Ohio River, because I do not want to run into one and find out if it really is friendly.
Morbid Facts, Part 153. Per Olin, known by his stage name Dead, was the lead singer for the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem, as well as the Swedish death metal band Morbid. At age 10, he was attacked by some bullies who injured him so badly that he was legally declared dead for a few minutes. After this incident, Per began an unhealthy obsession with anything related to death. He collected dead birds, wore corpse paint when he performed, and even routinely cut himself while on stage or in front of friends. Olin was believed to have suffered from Cotard syndrome, a mental disorder characterized by the belief that you are truly dead and don't exist in reality. In 1991, Dead took his own life by slicing his wrists and throat and shooting himself in the forehead with a shotgun. He left a note that was very brief because he didn't believe that he was alive in the first place. His body was soon discovered by one of his bandmates, who immediately ran to a nearby store and bought a disposable camera instead of calling 911. He took multiple photos of his dead friend and would later use one of them as cover art for a future album.
This is one of the worst ways somebody has ever died. In October 2012, an awful and disturbing thing happened. A 62-year-old employee at Bumblebee Foods named Jose Molina was having a normal day in the Bumblebee facility in California. In his schedule, Jose was tasked with the performance maintenance on an 11-meter-long industrial oven, so he went inside one of the tanks to begin his work. Believing that Jose was in the bathroom, one of his coworkers actually shut the tank's door, trapping Jose inside, and then filled the oven with 5,400 kilograms of tuna and then turned the oven on. A search then ensued when the manager realized Jose was missing, but by then it was way too late. They found Jose's body 2 hours later inside the oven, completely burnt and melted away, 100% unrecognizable. The temperature inside the oven reached 270 degrees Fahrenheit, and Jose was unfortunately cooked alive inside of the tank with all the fish. And you could only imagine how horrific this death actually was. Could you imagine being cooked alive and then being crushed by tens to thousands of pounds of fish, mixed with the smell, the texture, the heat? This death was just awful. The company Bumblebee and 2 managers were actually charged for this death, and the company got off with a $6 million settlement. But do you think $6 million is way too low for a death like this? Many people believe it should have been more close to $50 million. Nonetheless, this is by far one of the worst and most uncomfortable deaths of all time, and I can't imagine Jose's thoughts as he was being cooked alive with hundreds of fish.
We need to talk about Johnny Depp's portrayal of the Mad Hatter, because it is full of dark history Easter eggs that you may have missed. If you know of the character the Mad Hatter, then you may also know about the dark history of hatters. For 250 years, people that made hats were using a poisonous mercury-based solution that caused their bodies to fall apart and for them to slowly lose their minds, which I just did a whole episode on that and other deadly beauty and fashion trends that you should check out. When Johnny Depp got the role of the Hatter, he became obsessed with the dark history of hat making, and he wanted to include parts of that history in the character. And the biggest homage he pays to that history is with the orange hair. The mercury solution that hatters used to use was called carroting solution because it was so bright orange. They would sit in these poorly ventilated rooms all day, just inhaling the poisonous mercury, getting sicker and sicker. And Johnny Depp wanted to honor that. He wanted the skin to be pale and sickly. He wanted his teeth to look like they were decaying because that's what would happen to these people. And finally, and this is my favorite detail, he put a lot of details into the costume to make it look like he was a hat maker. Up here in his hat, there's tools to make hats. He has a ring that's a push pin, and on the other side he has this belt of thread so he could be sewing hats all day. Anyways, I have so much more on the dark history of hatting in this week's episode, and you're definitely going to want to check it out.
Morbid facts about Michael Jackson, Part 3. In 2002, Michael was staying at a hotel in Berlin when he dangled his 9-month-old son blanket over his 4th-floor balcony. Jackson claimed he was simply excited and wanted to show off his baby to the fans below, but the media was quick to criticize Michael's parenting skills and life-threatening behavior. Jackson later apologized, stating that it was a mistaken judgment and that he didn't mean to endanger his son. Blanket is now 21 years old and rarely makes public appearances. During the shooting of a Pepsi commercial in 1983, Michael's hair caught on fire when the pyrotechnics went off too early. He suffered second-degree burns to his scalp and permanently lost a chunk of his hair. Many say that this moment was a major turning point in Michael's life, claiming that the painkillers he took after the accident started his downward spiral into a life of pain and drug addictions. But despite all of this, instead of suing Pepsi, Michael asked the company to fund the creation of a burn center.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. If your plane is crashing into the water, just know that flight attendants are trained to not allow any dead bodies on life rafts. That means no saving grandma for her funeral, simply yeet that bitch overboard. 1 out of every 50 women have a third nipple, and 1 out of every 100 men do too. This is known as a supernumerary nipple, and Mark Wahlberg actually has one. Harry Styles has 2. Your baby foreskin can be used as replacement skin for burn victims. That means one can quite literally be a dick face. There are corn stars born in the year 2003. That's the same year The Cat in the Hat came out. Male fetuses get boners in the womb, and these can often be seen on ultrasounds. Motherfucker. After 49 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, cops were investigating the scene, and you'd think it'd be pretty quiet in there. But it was actually filled with sounds of ringing cell phones. Friends, family members, loved ones, calling the people that they knew were at Pulse, and hoping they'd answer the phone and say they were okay.
Here are some things that are completely normal during the day, but really creepy at night. Digging holes in your backyard. I mean, it's your backyard, and you're entitled to do whatever you want to it, but if I see you digging some holes in the middle of the night, I'm gonna be really concerned. Bonus creepy points if you have some trash bags next to you, too. I feel bad for people who work graveyard shifts or are night owls, because it makes it difficult to do any gardening or landscaping without looking pretty creepy. They say a child's laughter is one of the most beautiful sounds in the world, but not if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Scary movies have absolutely ruined the sound of a child laughing for me, because most instances, I'm gonna assume the worst. And for some reason, little girls laughing are even more scary. Like, imagine being in the woods camping and you hear some little girl laughing in the distance. My brain isn't gonna think, oh cool, some family must be camping near us. No, I'm gonna think that I'm gonna get murdered or possessed by some demon. Someone knocking on your door during the day, it's annoying. Who the f is showing up at my house unannounced? It must be a salesman or, worse, Mormons. That same knock at 3 in the morning? No, I'm getting murdered for sure. I'm on the 2nd floor, and my only way out is to jump out the window, so I'm done for.
Morbid Facts, Part 269. Actor and comedian David Spade has a tragic past. His dad walked out on him when he was a toddler, and his stepdad took his own life when he was a teenager. His first best friend died in a motorcycle crash, his second best friend Chris Farley died from an overdose, and his sister-in-law Kate Spade took her own life. Not to mention, David's own assistant once broke into his home and tased David while he was sleeping, forcing Spade to grab his shotgun and threaten to shoot. In 2012, Dutch taxidermist Bart Jansen turned his dead cat Orville into a functioning drone to pay tribute to the cat's love for birds. Jansen has since launched his own animal drone company that turns family pets into flying machines. In the original Friday the 13th, an actual snake was killed in the scene where one was found in the cabin. The snake's handler, who wasn't told that the snake would be killed for the movie, was incredibly upset and had to be held back by crew members when it happened.
These are 8 horrifying facts that will probably keep you up at night. Number 1. Your ears never stop growing. They get bigger and bigger the more you age. Number 2. During a person's lifetime, on average, a person spends 1 whole year sitting on the toilet. Number 3. In 1977, we received an audio signal from space that was 42 seconds long. To this day, we don't know where this audio signal came from. Number 4. Raining animals. Throughout history, there have been documented instances of animal rain, a phenomenon where frogs, fish, and even spiders are swept up in waterspouts and then fall from the sky with raindrops. Number 5. The zone of silence is an area in Mexico where radio signals and any type of communication cannot be received or sent. Number 6. The boiling river. In the heart of the Peruvian Amazon lies a river so hot that it boils. The Shanai Timpishka River. It reaches temperatures up to 93 degrees Celsius or 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Number 7. The sleeping city of Kalachi. Residents of Kalachi, Kazakhstan, have been plagued by a mysterious condition that causes people to fall asleep for several days, often waking up with no memory of the episode. Investigations suggest that elevated levels of carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons due to uranium mines might be the cause, though no definite explanation has been established. Number 8. The Voynich Manuscript. This mysterious book dates back to the 15th century. It is filled with writings of an unknown language or code and detailed illustrations of non-existent plants, astronomical diagrams, and strange human-like figures in bizarre contexts. Despite efforts of cryptographers and scholars, no one was able to solve these codes. We don't know what the book says. We don't know who wrote it.
These are the 5 scariest space facts. You've been warned. If a massive asteroid was headed for the Earth, the chances are there isn't really much we could do. At any moment, the sun could emit a coronal mass ejection aimed at the Earth, and if we weren't prepared for it, it could destroy the entire world's energy grid and leave us without power for years. There are black holes lurking in the shadows, roaming throughout our galaxy, and if one entered our solar system, it would be all over. When a star runs out of fuel, it can emit a gamma ray burst, and if a star within 3,000 light years of Earth happened to emit a gamma ray burst and it was aimed at us, the ozone layer would be destroyed. Finally, every year there is more space junk created, putting us at risk of being trapped within the Earth.
If you haven't heard about the extremely disturbing case known as the Girl Scout murders, then you may want to stick around. Viewer discretion is advised. In June of 1977, more than 100 girls headed off to Camp Scott in Locust Grove, Oklahoma, hoping for a summer filled with fun and newfound friendships. But little did these girls know that their dream would become short-lived extremely fast after a tragic event took place on the campgrounds. It was about 2 months before the incident occurred when a young camp counselor found a note in her belongings claiming that there was going to be 3 girls in one tent murdered this year while all the girls were attending camp. Knowing that the campers and other counselors like to play pranks on one another, she just dismissed the note and left it there as a joke. But little did she know that she would come to regret this very quickly when the tragic events began to unfold on the campgrounds. On the night of June 12, 1977, a storm blew through Oklahoma, leaving the girls to take cover and hide away in their sleeping bags to be protected from the bad weather. It wouldn't be until the next morning that a camp counselor would come and check on the girls after the storm and realize that 3 of them were stuffed deep down in their sleeping bags with bloody sheets and signs of strangulation, rape, and even mutilation. The 3 girls whose dead bodies were found in those sleeping bags were 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michelle Goose, and 10-year-old Denise Milner. After the death of these 3 innocent girls, police and other law enforcement agencies rushed to the scene so that they could start their investigation and get to the bottom of who could have possibly targeted these 3 innocent girls. Discovered near the campgrounds was a cave that police would decide to go into, where they would find masking tape and 2 wedding photos, which seemed to be a very strange combination. After the photos were released to the public, an old prison employee actually called in, claiming that he has seen those photos before and he's almost certain he knows who committed these horrific acts on these young women. And he believed that the person behind these sick and twisted murders was a man by the name of Gene Leroy Hart, who was an escaped convict and convicted rapist back during the time of the Girl Scout murders. The crazy thing is, Hart was actually acquitted due to the lack of evidence on the police end, and he claimed that he was actually framed and that he did not commit the murders, even though there was trace evidence of his DNA found at the crime scene. And it's still unknown if Hart actually committed these murders or if he was actually just framed. And now, here in 2023, after the not guilty verdict years and years ago, there is new evidence that has arisen that Gene Leroy Hart was actually very closely linked with these murders.
Creepy last words people said right before dying. Registered nurse Shirley Smith said that she had a very rich patient who was a true Satanist that was dying of cancer. The patient had upside-down crosses and a Satan's Bible by her bedside. Shirley said that she will never forget what happened. It was the middle of the summer, and yet it was so cold and dark in her room that you couldn't even stand it, even in the middle of the day. She said that it got so evil feeling in there that she had to call a priest to pray with her and her aides before they would even enter the room. When the patient passed away, she had not spoken in over 24 hours. And then all of a sudden, she sat straight up and said, "Satan, take me." and then she fell back on the bed. Shirley said that after she passed, the room got bright and extremely warm. Shockingly, when they moved the patient's body, they had to get rid of the mattress because where her body had been, it looked burnt, and the most horrible smell was emanating from the mattress cover. Needless to say, Shirley went to confession immediately because she did not want an evil spirit around her. A nurse said that one of their patients had a serious recurrence and had to be admitted. Over the course of several nights, he had become quite upset during rounds. He kept asking for his wallet, saying that he had to pay the ferryman. The medical student on rotation in the department took a quarter out of his pocket and put it in the patient's hand. The patient then dropped the coin into the cup on his bedstand and calmed down. Later that night, he passed away quietly. The nurse asked what happened. The medical student, who remembered his Greek mythology, said that the patient had to pay Charon, the ferryman, to be taken across the river Styx. A nurse said that he was doing rounds at a hospital. There was one two-patient room, and one of the patients was a very loud and confused woman who could be quite a handful. On this particular night, she had a roommate who had passed away shortly before the nurse entered the room. She was DNR, so there was no code blue. When he entered the room, he noticed that the elderly lady, who was usually very loud and confused, was sitting quietly with her hands crossed neatly upon her lap. Something was different, and there was this look of serenity on her face. She asked him in a voice that seemed much younger and clearer than before, "Did you see them, young man? They're so beautiful." He said, "No, ma'am, there's no one else here." She said, "They're right next to you, talking to Mrs. Banneker. The angels. They're so beautiful." He said that he instantly felt every hair of his body stand up, and an electric tingle course up and down his spine. "They're not here for me this time," she said sadly.